Welcome back to part 3 of our exhibition on the history of Shocklands. Today we start with the green and white color pairing, the Selesnya Conclave. The Conclave is a peaceful, nature-oriented guild that seeks harmony between nature and the citizens of Ravnica. They are responsible for agriculture, charity and communal service within the city-state. Founded by Matt Selesnya, an elemental that emerged through the union of several dryads, the guild's territory provides lush greenery, gardens and sun-filled spots open for all citizens. Rob Alexander's temple garden was the first to capture the essence of the Selesnya. We see the enormous city structures of Ravnica filled with trees, plants and greenery of all sorts. We recognize both aspects of nature, ravaging green that spreads wherever it can, and controlled cultivation on the ground. The societal structures are not made to replace the forest but to enable a new form of woodland. We see this emphasized in a giant tree in the background that upholds a dome. The forest is part of the architecture for the Selesnya. They see the need for building roads but argue that they do not inherently contradict a strong connection to nature. It's maybe one of the best lands to get a true grasp of the city plane scope. The church seems like a miniature within a larger dome, so one must truly let it sink in just how big the windows in the back are. The next iteration by Volker Borge keeps the similar scope, but infuses it with much more order. Where Alexander's work seemed more natural, the buildings and trees alike just growing wherever they can, this garden seems much more cultivated. Not only is the image immediately more structured due to the symmetrical alignment, the fact that all trees are put onto pedestals underline the newfound order. Nature is still more than palpable, but it got tamed and seems to serve more than ravage freely. Only the two bridges on the top seem reminiscent of a nature roaming free. As the seasons change, green will turn to dust. This time we visit Ravnica during autumn, showing grey skies and orange leaves in many artworks. This also applies to the Selesnya Temple Garden. While there's still some green trees to be found, most have turned orange by now. We see them growing around the Conclave home in a much more organic way compared to the last Temple Garden. The way that we're looking up further emphasizing the scope of this stony treehouse. But even with this angle, the image also underlines the vulnerability of the Conclave. For now, this still looks like a lush stronghold, but how will it look when orange turns to grey, and even the trees catered to by the Selesnya turn naked? This set being staged on the eve of the catastrophe that was War of the Sparks, this painting by Titus Lunter shows that also the Conclave is far from invulnerable. How about the Temple Garden on Zendikar by Minium? The sharp edges and clear forms on Ravnica make place for strong brushstrokes, blurry transitions and washed out colors. Hume's Temple Garden shows us chained hedrons over the mountaintops. We see trees growing over the stony structures as a blazing light shines down upon the garden. When Ravnica gardens are temples, here we see temples get turned into gardens. The hedrons, cages and reminders for the fretted Eldrazi merge with floating islands in the background. These temples for the reality-consuming aberrations now get consumed by the ravaging nature of Zendikar. Final Temple Garden takes us to Ferros. Here we see a holy site dedicated to Karametra, the god of harvest. Built amidst an old ruin, the theme of regrowing is immediately present. The Karametra statue built upon a temple as she watches over Pine Avenue, an evening sun shining its last rays upon the goddess. While ranks and trees climb up the wall, most of nature is tamed here. This is in line with their praised deity. Karametra represents not nature, but nature in the service of man. Respect, patience and hard work towards nature will end one's hunger and give purpose. The gratitude towards Karametra is based on what she enables these societies to do. A statue of a fox watches over the garden, unclear if it is a relic or built with a temple. The deity with a plough in her hand, while the vases next to her spill water for the fields. Here the garden, or what it stands for, is as much part of the ideal as the temple is. So harmony between nature and society in various forms is the focus of Temple Garden. It is the idea that these are not competing forces but rather elements that can complement each other. This stands in a stark contrast to the ideology of the Gruul clan and their red and green color pairing. The clans have much more disturbing history than one might think. Initially tasked with protecting the wild, untamed forests of Ravnica, they once were a noble and proud guild, but the other 9 had different plans. Overrunning the wild and plastering it in cobblestone, the Gruul lost everything. The Simic seized control over nature's future while the Selesnya incorporated it into society. Suddenly the guild had no purpose. The Azorius wrote them out of the law since they no longer served any cause for the city. The Boros Legion therefore no longer had any obligation to protect them, which resulted in enslavement by the Orsif. Broken by the betrayal, the lack of purpose turned into anger against society. Where the Selesnya propagate harmony, the Gruul preach untamed, ravaging nature. They despise the stone buildings, destroying them whenever they can. The various clans now roam the city plain, unleashing their anger upon all that stand in their way, and reclaiming the city in the name of nature, never forgetting the pain they have experienced on the other's behalf. The first stomping ground, again by Rob Alexander, paints a dramatically different picture than all the other Shocklands. A bright sun shines through the dusky sky, revealing ruins and wasteland. It is the only original Shockland where the sky is present. With the first hollowed fountain we can see a bit of blue sky, but all other Shocklands present us nothing but cobblestone. The Gruul have torn it all down, revealing the sky and letting nature roam free once again. In the foreground, young greenery starts to flourish once again, now having much more space to breathe and take in all the sunlight. The wasteland is a testimony to the anger and pain of the broken clans and the potential of their fury. This idea of reclaiming gets further emphasized in this iteration by David Palumbo. Under the red sky we see a tree consuming a larger structure. Stairs carved into the tree's roots imply that a clan has ravaged this site, but still refuses to walk on the cursed stone if not necessary. Tents hanging from the side of the root further underline this notion. When the first stomping ground showed the wasteland after raid, this shows the slow but steady reclamation. The tree wrapping through the tower like a kraken pulling something into the deep. The nature of the Gruul gets summarized by a quote of Domri Raid. Roots, ruin and a room to fight are all the comforts of home. When the first stomping ground was the waste after raid, this one by James Pike is set during one. Looking from the ground up, we see flames and roots consuming the cityscape. The ground is cracked up, the air is full of rubble and a strong red glow is seen all around. The sky in the back is still bright and clear, not yet being tainted by the wrath of the clans. A quote gives context to the destruction, as Nikia of the Old Way says, "What we begin the end race will finish, then we'll dance in Ravnica's rubble." Here she is referencing the old Gruul prophecy that predicted the arrival of Ilhard, the boar god, bringing the end race, stomping Ravnica into the ground and unleashing nature's wrath upon the cobbled streets. The prophecy symbolizes the ultimate revenge fantasy by the clan. An equally powerful, albeit more neutral wrath is depicted in these stomping grounds by Min Yum. One of the floating isles is crashing down onto the plain of Sandika. Yum captures the moment of impact as the breeze is thrown through the landscape. The strong brushstrokes and blurred colors evoke this feeling of witnessing the whole thing from far away. Where the other iterations of society versus nature, this piece leaves no space for reverses. Nature happens, furiously, but mercilessly like a storm. Society or not, the primal force just happens either way. The last iteration proposes harmony between nature and society, but not a humanoid one. This work by Darkeen takes us to Tarkir. We see the mighty dragon Lord Ataka residing in her keep called Dragonball. Several dragons standing before her, the heads bowed in obedience. The floor burns in the same color as Ataka's tail and horns. Nature and society have found together in a very different way here. While sentient enough to have hierarchies and leaders, the society needs neither home nor tools. Their claws are sharper than a sword ever could be, and their scales do not care about rain, snow or hail. The dragons are the epiphany of a nature getting sentient. None of these dragons would think about plastering this scene with stone. For them a forest full of prey, high mountains to fly upon and some cozy spot to sleep is all they need. Their wrath is only implied in the flames on the ground. It lingers there, ready to burst out if needed to. One can only imagine how much the Gruul crave these stomping grounds for Ravnica.